What up, what up, what up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Want to thank you for joining us for another very, very special edition of the Brothers Briefing. So glad you are here. I'm your co-host, Charles Coleman Jr., and joining me, of course, is my amazing co-host, Mr. Richard Fowler. We are so glad to have you. Make sure you are liked, subscribed, following, and sharing the Brothers Briefing. And trust me,
do all the things. Do all the things.
After today's episode, you are going to want to do just that. Richard,
do all the things.
Tell the people what we got going on today, my friend.
We have a big show today. I mean, obviously, we're covering. It was a wild week in news, so we're covering that. But beyond that, we're joined later in the show. So you want to stay with us for the whole show. We're joined by the one and only, the mayor of what he says is the greatest city in the world, freaking city, because he doesn't curse, freaking city in the world. I mean, I think there's people that will debate that. Charles might debate that.
But and if I said that, you know it's not Mandami. So who else could it be?
It is the mayor of Chicago. I mean, it's a brothers show, so you should assume like you eliminate process of elimination. You get down to a couple, but the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, is joining us on this episode of the Brothers. We promised y'all we would do these big things, and so we're doing them. And y'all are here for the journey. But before we get to Brandon Johnson, we have other stories of the week to cover.
We do.
And I'll tee up the first one here because I'll tell you. I'm going to tell you. I mean, I live in D.C. There's a lot of things we know, a lot of things we don't know. We're still not sure if Mitch McConnell is dead or alive, even though this week he posted a photo of him sitting in a chair. It was a still photo. Elaine Chao, the Secretary Elaine Chao, who was in China during his sickness, has reappeared. We're not really sure what's happening there. But I think I actually do believe he was prompted to post that photo because of this story. I was out minding I was in the streets this weekend, came home, settled in, and around 2 a.m. a phone started going off, Charles, because the sudden passing
Lady G is dead. Lady G is dead.
The sudden passing of the senior senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, happened Saturday night, Sunday morning. And I got to tell you, here in Washington is all a shuffle. It's all a shuffle for a number of reasons, too. So Lindsey Graham, prior to his death, I guess the day of his death, he was returning from international travel. He was in Ukraine, and he was in the process, Charles, of closing what would have been a significant sanctions, a piece of legislation that would have been robust secondary sanctions against Russia. Now, folks who don't understand what secondary sanctions are, primary sanctions are, like you said, we are sanctioning no American companies can or shall or will do business with a particular country. We're going to hold on to their assets, etc. Secondary sanctions say if your company does business with Russia and say, I don't know, let's pick a company, Airbus. If your company does business with the Russian government or any of the people that are on our sanction list, we will not do business with you. That's a secondary sanction. Lindsey Graham was in the process of getting that deal done. And now he's with, maybe he's with our maker, maybe not. I don't know. He's
transitioned.
He has transitioned to the other life.
He's transitioned to the next realm. So here's the thing. I said, Lady
May his
G,
memory be a blessing.
I said, Lady G. I don't want to be in poor taste.
Don't attack a dead man.
Yeah, I'm not gonna denigrate him. Lindsey Graham, senior senator from the Palmetto State of South Carolina, has passed. It's interesting because obviously this raises a number of different questions around the circumstances of his death. Obviously, with him having traveled abroad and then suddenly gotten ill and passed away, that is a question. Like you, Richard, you were awake. I was not. When I did waken, my phone was just crazy in terms of the news and how it was everywhere. And there are a number of different details that have surfaced around allegations with respect to his personal life, with respect to how he may have passed away and gotten sick. But
according to coroner reports, aortic dissection.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know what that means. I'm a lawyer, and I'm okay not knowing what that means because I'm a lawyer. If it was a legal term, then that'd be different. What I'll say is, for me, the biggest question looking at this story, without, with no disregard for the legacy and memory of Lindsey Graham, I'm actually looking at how other electeds are processing this in the landscape of electoral politics. On the show, we have talked many times about the idea that, people who are senior statespersons, men and women, elected officials, need to think critically about the space that they put their parties in when they make these decisions. Because at the end of the day, we're going beyond personal decisions. When you are 71 years old, like Lindsey Graham was, and you decide to stay in office, yes, this was unexpected. This was not.
Yeah, he was able-bodied, to be fair.
You were able-bodied, but again, you're still past the retirement age in America. You're still someone who is, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, this becomes an instructive conversation for me, Richard, because you opened the show talking about Mitch McConnell, who's older than Lindsey Graham, right?
Mitch is older than Lindsey Graham. And just for the record, my mom is a nurse. I've dated a couple of doctors in my life. An aortic dissection is a life-threatening illness. And basically what happens is the aorta, which is the main artery in the body, tears. And after it tears, blood surges through that tear, forcing the inner and middle layer of the aorta wall to separate. And when that separates, it's unrestricted bleeding inside the body. And that leads to restrictions in blood flows in another part of the body, and a fatal rupture. And oftentimes it is fatal. And in the case of Lindsey Graham, it was fatal. And to everything you said, I do think there's a conversation around age. Not so much in Lindsey Graham. I think he was very able-bodied. He had just come back from Ukraine. He was in the process of negotiating an Israeli-Saudi deal. But I think he's also the chair of the budget committee. And I think that is one of the reasons why Washington is scrambling in this moment, because what Lindsey Graham was attempting to do I'll give Lindsey Graham, whether you like him or not, he has a lot of cachet in the United States Senate based on how long he had been there, based on his relationships across the aisle, etc. What he was trying to do, we're going to talk about this later on the show before the mayor of Chicago joins us, is he was trying to chop up the SAVE Act, which is, Donald Trump's new attempt to sort of, and I'm using air quotes here, create voter integrity. Not that there isn't currently any. It's a solution in search of a problem. But what he was trying to do, what Lindsey was trying to do, he was trying to cut up pieces of that bill, like the spending portions of that bill, and try to fashion it into a reconciliation bill that the budget committee would pass, and you wouldn't need 60 senators to sign on. And without him, the question is, will this reconciliation bill go on? I think the other questions, Charles, that people are sort of thinking about is he is currently up for re-election, right? So his seat is vacant, and now he had just won his primary. He didn't really have a primary, but he had just won his primary. So now the question is, who will the governor of South Carolina appoint? Will he appoint a placeholder, or will he appoint somebody that will likely be in this midterm elections? And how does this upset the balance of power? I mean, I don't see a Democrat winning the South Carolina Senate seat, but hey, it's worth talking about it.
But this is why, Richard, we're going to get to the SAVE Act piece in a moment, but I don't want us to skip past this age conversation. Here's the thing. If you woke up or got a text message Saturday night or Sunday morning and they told you that a senior federal legislator from the state of South Carolina had passed away, who would you have thought it was?
A senior senator from South Carolina?
No, not senior senator, a senior legislator, a senior federal legislator.
Oh, I would have thought it was probably be Jim Clyburn.
Of course. And this is my point. My point is, with respect to,
and he's also very able-bodied, to be fair.
I'm not saying that they're not, right? And that's correct. I have literally hung and kicked it with with Congressman Clyburn. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that folks dodge these bullets, but to connect the dots of where you left off, what you're not considering is the position that you're placing your party in. Like, people are talking about, these electeds and the fact that they won re-election and may not have decided to run for re-election after, like, this was their last term. They got to live through their last term. And we don't know what these appointments are going to look like. And the margins are very tight on both sides. That's the reality, right? Like, the reality is that neither party has a secure hold on either chamber such that they can afford these unanticipated losses in a midterm season where we're expecting to see some shifts. So I just sort of really emphasize the importance of people thinking this through. We find ourselves in a similar conundrum as we look at the court, with people sort of staying too long and how that may have impacted what is now a supermajority for conservatives on the Supreme Court. And look, I'm not trying to be ageist, because I do understand that these people are, as Richard has said, able-bodied and they are capable. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the end-all be-all when you're thinking about whether it's time to retire and hang it up. So I don't want us to skip past the age part, because for me, that's a big part of the conversation.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I agree with you 100%. I think it is about can our legislature function if you have so many folks that are over, and I think you brought up the right point, over the American retirement age, right? Yeah, the American retirement age is 65. And there's a lot of folks in the Senate in this moment that are above that retirement age. And like I said, that's the reason why I thought Mitch McConnell, they propped him up in that chair and they said, smile for this photo. Because I think they had to, in a world in which his colleague, an able-bodied colleague, sort of just drops dead in the middle of the night and awakens a Washington that was not expecting it. Because Washington, I'm telling you, we were not expecting
No, of course not. I don't think anybody was. No,
I mean, most of those Sunday shows were prepared to talk about Iran. I mean, and if you even saw, and this is a little bit inside baseball, Sunday shows, as Charles can tell you, that Sunday shows are prepped sometimes weeks out. Sure. Sometimes when it comes to the panel, we're prepped a month out. Like, I know I'm doing a Sunday show 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now. But as far as guests for those Sunday shows, those guests are usually booked the Tuesday or the Wednesday for the show on Sunday. And if you even let's take the Meet the Press lineup, Bibi Netanyahu, Ro Khanna. So they had prepared a show to be about Israel and Iran. And the passing of Lindsey Graham was like, oh, we have to change our whole show. The whole line. And we only have, I don't know, a couple hours to do it, because this happens at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, which means for many of these show producers, they had to wake somebody up and they had to re-rack an entire show based on this news. And I mean, listen, that's breaking news. That's what we do. That's fine. But it just goes to say, I mean, I think if, Charles Coleman Jr. was a senior senator from South Carolina, nobody would be expecting him. You could also have an aortic dissection, but it would be less likely for you to have an aortic dissection.
That brings me to a good point. I got to give a shout out to our girl Chanel, who does amazing work on the Brothers Briefing, because she also was literally one of the people you just described who got caught up in that.
Yeah, she's our booking producer.
She's our booking producer. Shout out to Chanel, because she got caught in that and had to make some very quick calls and adjustments for a Sunday show that she works on. So shout out to you, Chanel, for the work that you did to pull that together. But let's talk about let's lean into this SAVE Act piece.
Yeah, let's, because that was also a big story. This week.
So we've gone from seeing Donald Trump sort of be a little bit hesitant, gun shy, resistant around the housing bill to being flat out defiant. At this point, the president has declared that he will not sign the housing bill, and he himself has characterized it as in protest of the fact that Congress has not, or that the SAVE Act is not being approved. So basically, he's saying, I'm protesting this and holding this housing bill hostage because you will not give me what this bipartisan, I want to point that out, this bipartisan bill hostage that could be a win for Republicans.
Well, it was billed as a win for Republicans.
Was billed as a win for Republicans. I'm holding that hostage because you're not giving me what I want with the SAVE Act.
I mean, he called it a yawn.
What do you make of that sort of declaration, Richard?
So just a couple of things. This is actually one of those cool, I mean, if you're a total history buff and you care about the Constitution and all that crap.
Imagine,
right? So the 21st Century Road to Housing Bill was a bipartisan bill aimed at tackling housing affordability. It did a couple of things, right, that were actually really good. It was a bill that was pieced together by Elizabeth Warren and some Republicans, and they worked together to create it. And what the bill did is it sort of stopped big corporations from buying single houses. It put some money in the field. Like, now, it's not going to be immediate relief. We're not talking about immediate relief, but it will help deal with the supply issue that we have. One of the reasons why housing cost is so high in America has a lot to do with supply. We do not have enough housing supply, which means the demand for housing has not changed. Actually, demand has gone up, and so housing is moving up that demand curve, and you're seeing the prices go up. So what the law primarily aims to do is tackle America's affordability problem by increasing supply, including provisions to promote manufactured housing, promote office to apartment conversions and many of those empty buildings in many of these major cities. One major city mayor, which we're going to talk to in a little bit. It also would authorize a pilot program to offer grants and forgivable loans to fix older homes that have fallen into despair. And this bill is now law, to be fair. And the reason why this bill becomes law is in the Constitution, there's this sort of section called a pocket pass or a pocket veto. This got a pocket pass, right? So if the president doesn't act on a bill after 10 business days where that Congress is in session, the bill becomes law. But it doesn't get the glitz that it needed for some of these House Republicans and some of these Senate Republicans that are in very vulnerable situations going into November. And so what was supposed to happen was there was supposed to be a signing ceremony in the U.S. Capitol. They had, when I mean there was supposed to, I'm not making this up, y'all. Like, they had a stage, they had the backdrop, they had the chairs out, they had the ceremonial pens. Supposed to be a signing ceremony. Donald Trump, minutes before the ceremony, cancels the ceremony. There's even reporting, Charles, that there were members of Congress that showed up to the signing ceremony and didn't realize it was canceled.
Wow.
Like they were like, oh, there's no signing ceremony. And while this happened, like, you see the staff in the Capitol building, many of them Black, brown folk, taking the stage apart. And the reason why Donald Trump did not want to sign this bill is because he knew it was bipartisan. And so he wanted to put, for Democrats, what would have been a poison pill in the bill, which was the SAVE Act. But the SAVE Act was not only a poison pill for Democrats. The SAVE Act is a poison pill for many Republicans, including Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. And for many Republicans where in their state, mail-in voting is the thing. Like, there's a thing, like, people mail-in vote, like, Arizona, there's a lot of parts of the country where mail-in voting is part of the state's culture, right? And there's some red states where mail-in voting is part of the state's culture. Yeah. And so now to know that this isn't happening because Donald Trump wants the SAVE Act so bad. And the SAVE Act, Charles, I think you have to tell folks how. If you haven't heard about the SAVE Act, Google it, look it up, research it. But the top lines of this bill is pretty regressive.
So this is where I come, where I, as a civil rights attorney, come in.
I'm gonna give it to you because this is not.
It's one thing to talk about free and fair elections, but the reality is the SAVE Act puts the types of restrictions inexplicably on what it is to have access to voting for so many different people that make it far more restrictive and far less free. I think that if you're someone who's listening to this and you live in an urban city or locale where you have access to public transportation, where you have access to administrative buildings, where you have access to a host of different things and services that you might see from an administrative place as being sort of par of the course, it's something that you are able to, you might have trouble understanding. And I'm going to be, quick here. But the reality is everyone does not live the same way. And there are a number of different people for whom this places lots of extra restrictions on them and their actual right to vote and the ability of them being able to access the ballot box. And like Richard said, it is a solution looking for a problem. It is a hero looking for a villain, because in America,
all of those,
all of the above, right? Because in America, these problems with respect to voting don't exist. And so I will say again, in conclusion, what I've said before, which is the more that the president continues to lean into the SAVE Act as something that he needs to have, the more it seems to appear that he is hell-bent on trying to control the outcome of November's elections. There it is.
Well, I think that's definitely the reason why. And this is all him. Like, this all goes back to him trying to get those 11,000 votes in Georgia that he never got. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up Republicans' ability possibly to win this midterm, like possibly have a chance at winning this midterm election, especially for the vulnerable ones. And I'm going to try to get this regressive voting law passed. He's also doing it in other ways. We talked about it on last week's show. He's going to HHS and he's Homeland Security and tying disaster relief money to how states manage their elections. I mean, it's some wild stuff. And I think a lot of states are saying, wait a minute. No, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't do that. And now it's literally cost Republicans what would have been a really big victory on affordability.
In a year and at a time when they really need it.
And they need it because, look, Democrats are going to hammer them over the head. And now he's given Democrats a point, because Democrats get to go around the country now and be like, look, they say they cared about housing affordability, but the president was more concerned about who's on the voting rolls, and they don't have a bill signing. And we got a bill, but they can't really talk about the bill because the president didn't sign the bill.
That's right.
It's wild. Anyway, we're going to a break, and when we come back from this break,
we've got our special guest, Brandon Johnson, is going to be the mayor of Chicago. Make sure you are staying right here. You're listening to the Brothers Briefing. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, because this is where you will hear everything you need to hear relevant to news, lifestyle, and politics with respect to Black men.
We'll be back.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've been waiting for it. We've been promising it, and here it is. We are so honored and thankful to be joined on the Brothers Briefing, especially by this is our first guest on this new format.
We're growing. We bring bigger guests. That's how this
That's right. Bigger platform, bigger guests, and we could not be happier to have with us the esteemed, the illustrious mayor of Chicago, Brother Brandon Johnson. Thank you very much for being here, our friend. We want to welcome you to the Brothers Briefing, and thank you for being here. I have my applause queued up.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
Not the applause sound effect.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I had to do it. I
always love the live studio audience. It makes me feel even that much more, important. So thank you, Charles. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for giving me space to be on with the brothers.
Sure.
Absolutely. So we're just going to jump right into it, right? There's so many different things that we talk about with respect to your city, being a Black mayor, being a Black man, and the things that you've dealt with during this time frame. And I would love to just open up the conversation in talking to you about what it is to govern as a progressive in the middle of a democratic landscape that seems to be really still heavily laden by centrists and moderates. There seems to be a wave of insurgent politics that we've seen in my city, in New York, and across the country that are asking for something different. People could argue, look, as far as Brandon Johnson is concerned, y'all are late to the party. Like he was one of the, Brandon Scott and some others were among the real first, electeds to go against that centrist wave. How do you sort of see this landscape playing out, particularly as we head toward November?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Look, the struggle here in Chicago for progressive politics has an incredible history, right? 40 years ago, electing the first Black mayor in the history of Chicago. And of course, that was cut off, by his untimely death. But, with that being said, this sort of gradual continuum of Black liberation theology, progressive politics in Chicago, really begin to reshape, in earnest about 15 years ago. And that was a part of a larger political resistance around protecting our public assets. I was a part of that as an organizer with the Chicago Teachers Union, as a former public school teacher. And then, of course, being deeply rooted and connected with the faith community. And the best way I can describe it is, it was Dr. King at the AFSCME convention in 1967. I kind of look at it as a sort of a prophetic declaration when he said that if the labor rights movement and the civil rights movement were to ever collide, what enormous potential it will have. And I'm paraphrasing. And so the best way I can describe this moment is that you have faith and labor, particularly here in Chicago, and other progressive entities fighting for workers' rights, labor rights, civil rights, all coming together at this critical moment in a city that has historically birthed strong resistance movements while going up against, centrist or, quite frankly, conservative interests. And that perfect collision led to me becoming the 57th mayor of this city and carrying on that incredible tradition of Black liberation, civil rights, labor rights, all coming together to bring about the type of transformation that we are undergoing right now.
Well, you talked about Harold Washington. You mentioned him a little bit, and I do think we're in this unique moment where you're seeing this emergence, Mr. Mayor, of like the Black male politician sort of coming into his own, and from a very authentic place, not from the consultants tell me what to say, the consultants tell me what to do, which is, I think, part of the battle that's happening in sort of democratic politics. But I do think, for our audience, right, which are a lot of Black men, there also is unique pressure when you are a Black man in a place of leadership. And that pressure comes from the media, that pressure comes from the Black community, that pressure comes from every different direction. And I think you just explained your theory of the case on how you govern. But how do you manage the pressure, right? Because it is coming from every different direction. And I think it's unique for the Black male politician in this moment.
Yeah, well, look, let me just lift up the fact that, my father, almost 84 years old, was really the embodiment of that theory, right? He was a pastor. He was also a general contractor, but he was also a public employee, right? And so and he was, part of the NAACP. So I grew up in a home, with a hardworking Black man who was a man of his generation. Those men did not take sick days off. They didn't smile. They didn't give a lot of hugs and high fives, but they went to work every day, right? The grind was real. And so one thing that I took from my father is that the role of the Black man: provide, protect, and prepare. And that's really what I hold to in this moment. The pressures are what they are, right? And I've shared this with my son, my oldest. He's about to head off to college. And I said, look, man, my worst day is still better than your grandfather's best day. So it's just keeping that perspective and remaining humble, that my job is to, prepare the next generation for the way the economy is shifting, protecting our neighborhoods from violence, of course, and again, providing resources so that people can fulfill their God-given purpose. That's what I try to hold on to. It doesn't mean that pressure doesn't get to me, occasionally, but just knowing that I stand on the shoulders of men who came before me, who had to withstand pressure during circumstances and times that were as severe or worse. And if they were able to hold on long enough to see, the son of sharecroppers and slaves become the executive of one of the largest economies in the world, whatever pressure you apply, it's not going to be greater than the purpose providing and the planning and the preparation that I know that I have to do as the mayor of this great city.
I love that answer. And I love the perspective that you gave historically in terms of family. because I think it resonates with a lot of us. But I'm gonna double down on Richard's question, and I need you because if I'm listening to a polished elected official, I'm like, that's what I want him to say. Like that is your comms team right now should be really, really pleased with you.
They earned their keep today.
They earned their keep with those talking points. But I need you to talk to the 14, 15-year-old boy on the south side of Chicago who is listening to you and watching how, like, there's this guy. I don't know who he is. You don't got to identify him, but you know who he is. Every time I follow you on IG, I follow the office. There's one reporter from the pool. You know who he is. I don't know who he is because I'm not from Chicago. There's one reporter from the pool who likes to talk crazy to you and ask you wild questions that he knows the answers to, questions that are poorly contextualized, and you do a good job of checking him. You go toe to toe with POTUS, with the president, talking crazy about your city, not necessarily personal attacks, but still talking crazy about your city, talking crazy about your work inherently. I need you to talk to the 14, 15-year-old young man who sees it and is like, but you the mayor. So why are you allowing them to talk crazy to you? How do you navigate that? Because I'm a black boy and I need to understand how I'm supposed to handle this in my in my journey.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, thank you for the shout out to my comms team. And, they appreciate that, especially the one brother who has to work with me as we deal with these pressure points. Look, having that perspective, as a 50-year-old grown man, as I know that I've graduated from UNC to OG. Richard, I found that out. Once you turn 50, you're no longer UNC, you're OG.
Oh no, I'm in my UNC era. I'm enjoying.
Yeah, you're still UNC. Yeah, for sure. You have a few more years. But look, as I said, it's not. I'm not saying that it doesn't get to me. I'm not saying that it doesn't, provoke me. Right. I think what I'm trying to communicate and convey is that keeping and maintaining perspective around what my ultimate goal is, that's my center. That's how I remain focused, right? Because, look, spending time in prayer, listening to music, sometimes even venting with people who are close enough to me that can handle my vulnerability. All of that is healthy. And I think as Black men, we have to have people in our space where we can, speak very candidly, that we can be vulnerable. We can talk about our frustrations and in some instances, even our own fears that we might have, but for someone who was raising a 14-year-old, an 18-year-old, and my youngest, my daughter, but my two sons in particular, what I try to remind them of is that whatever your purpose is, that is the thing that has to drive you. Because no matter how provocating they are, they have to end the question or begin the question with Mr. Mayor. And that's not like a title that's
a bar. That is a bar right there.
And so like, as long as they understand and recognize that the respect that I hold in this position cannot be taken or withdrawn from anyone, as long as I hold true to my values, my purpose, utilizing the community and the village around me to help me through those frustrations. That's the motivation behind the response. And I think the last thing is, having composure and joy is a reflection of our resistance to their ridiculousness, right? Yeah. Now, look, I could pop off, right? And I'm not saying that would always be appropriate. I'm not saying that people wouldn't even understand, but finding the right language to be able to effectively communicate the hypocrisy, the fallacy of all of it, while also staying true to the purpose of why, I'm called or why you're called to do what you need to do. That is the best type of example that we can provide for Black men, stay in our power. Don't let anybody snatch that power away from you. And the moment you allow that, you might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't maintain the position of strength. I believe that's required in this season. And so no matter what the president says, I'm going to hold to my values. No matter how crazy the press might come at me, I'm going to hold to my values. And when it's appropriate, I'll get animated when necessary. But in the meantime, I'm going to stay focused on what the job that I have been elected to do. That's will always remain, my central focus.
I want to zoom out from that. I want to zoom out from that point from a little bit, because I do think what you're seeing, Mr. Mayor, happen around the country, right, is, and we've talked about this a lot on this show, whether it's DSA or it's the Democratic Party general, both of them, or the Democratic Party infrastructure, benefits from Black men voting. Black men are the only voting demographic that vote with their women more so than any other group. We are the most loyal voting, one of the most loyal voting demographics to the Democratic Party. Yet, I think what you see in the Democratic Party is when it comes to the problems that harm Black men, Democratic Party is not focused on it. Number one. And number two, when you have brothers like yourself, Brandon Scott, Mayor Dickens in Atlanta, who have broken all the hurdles, right? Not only have you broken all the hurdles in places of power, but you're using your place of power to decrease crime, create economic opportunity. There's almost as if the Democratic Party acts like it's not happening. And they sound like Republicans. Like, I've been on Texas Republicans saying there's crime in Chicago. I'm like, but it's lower than it was in 1968. And you hear Democrats almost sort of saying, well, we didn't even know they decreased the crime in Chicago. We missed the memo. So like, you have both of those things happening at the same time. And I think to the point that Charles is making, so you have a lot of Black men, young and old, saying, why should I be part of a democracy when I see the brothers who are in the democracy fighting for their lives and doing the right thing and nobody paying attention to it?
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up. Randall Woodfin, who was one of the original Black men that got elected in Birmingham, and of course, and I think about Cavalier in Milwaukee, and Justin in Cleveland, right? There are a number, the former mayor of Jackson, Mayor Lumumba. I mean, there are many examples of Black men leading across this country that really exudes, I think, the hopes and aspirations of our ancestors. One of the things that I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in Chicago is closing the life expectancy gap. That was something that was important to me. So in Chicago, people are living longer now over the last couple of years because of our investments. But the life expectancy gap between Black folks and white folks, it's shrunk. But the greatest closure was between white folks and Black men. So about 1.5 years, we were able to close the life expectancy gap between white folks and Black folks. But over 2 years, life expectancy gap closed between white folks and Black men. I just hired and just appointed to head up our public health department here in Chicago, Dr. Walker, a good brother, who's going to head up our division of public health to really take that work right into our communities to begin to address the social determinants of life expectancy. And it's everything from access to healthcare, access to mental health care as well. And so I know as Charles was kind of doubling down on, so for real, Mayor Johnson, how do you cope and deal with the pressure of being mayor? How do you maintain your mental health? Mayor Harold Washington, when he died, there were 19 mental health clinics. When I was sworn in, we were down to 6. So I reopened 3 mental health clinics in my first couple of years in office, expanding crisis assistance and response and engagement so that if there's a mental health crisis, instead of a police officer showing up to the scene, a paid behavioral mental health crisis worker can come and intervene. And we do know when mental health crises occurs, those individuals that have interactions with law enforcement are more likely to be harmed. And of course, those are Black men. And so these are just a couple of examples of why we have to stay engaged, because whether it's our public, whether it's our mental health, whether it's our health as a whole, including our mental health, these are the things that I'm investing in and hiring Black men who understand the assignment, right? So it's one thing to create a structure where we can address these social determinants. It's another thing when you put us in charge to actually carry out that mission. And that's what I'm doing.
That should be, but this should be the front page. Like if the DNC had a magazine, this should be the front page of the magazine. And regrettably, it's not. But hey,
yeah, I want to, Mayor Johnson. When the last time you and I talked in person, at least at Rainbow Push, we were talking kind of casually about your schedule for the day, and we said something. You were going from like a breakfast to like a funeral to like a birthday party to a rally to a parade.
Yes.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Yeah. And one of the things that really was impressed upon me in that conversation was something you said about, basically if someone could see or spend a day as mayor and see the sort of breadth and diversity of your city, people would look at the city and look at their neighbors. We were talking about how they would look at their neighbors a lot differently. Can you sort of expound on that, particularly in this time of division and polarization? I think it may contribute as to why you show up the way that you do for your city in the different constituencies, but everybody doesn't understand that.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I remember that conversation, and it's wild some days, right? Because, I could, be in a library, sitting down with children and families. And then, like I said, I could be at a parade. I could be in a senior home, a funeral, unfortunately, and everything else in between. But the beauty of Chicago, and I believe the opportunity for Black men to express joy and power in this moment is so ripe. When I think about just the history of Chicago, I talk often about Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, the Black Haitian immigrant who established this city, fell in love with a Potawatomi woman, had the first small business here in Chicago. And I think about the spirit of entrepreneurship and how Black men imbibe that spirit of entrepreneurship. I mean, that's deeply tethered and connected to our ancestral proclivities, as I like to describe, and it's holding to that truth that here this Black man believed that Chicago would be the global capital of the world by opening a small business, and it's turned into a city where immigrants from around the world, from all the different continents, descendants of the formerly enslaved have found refuge here in this city. It's that context, though, that I'm able to appreciate, whether you're on the north side of Chicago and you're talking to Black immigrants from the continent of Africa, or you're talking to Black men on the south side of Chicago who might be second or third generation from Mississippi or Arkansas, that the connectivity and the drive that we have to have the best possible experience here in Chicago. And here's the thing, the beauty of what I get to witness, plays out particularly with our small businesses and our developers, right? So I think about, Boa Construction, our brother Nosa, whose father was an immigrant, Black man. He's the first prime contractor to expand cargo in an airport. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars, and this brother is hiring our people. Or I think about Cornelius Griggs, GMA Construction, multi-million-dollar projects. AJ Patton, brother raised in the projects, multi-million-dollar projects through investments that I've made to develop our communities. And so it's through that context of knowing that it was a Black man who believed this city could be the global capital of the world, of which it is, while working with Black men who have taken that same entrepreneur spirit, whether it's through construction, whether it's through law, whether it's through public health. And I'm investing in those hopes and aspirations. And as a result, to your point, Richard, last year we had the fewest amount of homicides in 60 years. When we reduce homicides, we're saving Black men's lives, right? Because the person that is most likely to be harmed by gun violence is a young brother young boy between the ages of 10 to 24. And so it's the breadth of the city that I get to see. It's the joy of the city that I get to see, but it's the power of the city that I get to experience, that when you invest in our people, and particularly you invest in the hopes and dreams of Black boys and Black men, we can improve our health. We can improve our economy. We can create safer communities. And all of that is happening right now in the city of Chicago.
That answered the one question that I wanted to ask in the interview. That answer, or in my part of the interview, that answered. I got one more, but Richard, I know we're running on time.
We are running on time. I just wanted to ask this one because I think the whole world, everybody in the Black community is talking about our brother Nolan, who lost his life. And I would love to get your comments. I mean, I think there's so many Black parents in this moment trying to figure out how they had this conversation with their Black children. Another conversation have to have on top of how to interact with police, but now how to pick your friends, because the picking your friends could determine if you live or die. And I would love to get your comments on that before we go.
Well, as I said before we jumped on, my oldest, he's 18. I'm about to drop him off 3.5 hours outside of the city of Chicago as he embarks upon this next journey in his life. And I'm incredibly proud of him. He is headed to study accounting and finance at Eastern Illinois University. But here's the thing that I'm especially proud of, honestly, is that he's on the men's soccer team. And I believe he's only one of 4 Americans that are on the team. And, a Black boy.
Shout out to him for that.
No doubt. Absolutely. Black boy raised on the west side of Chicago, played soccer at a public high school on the south side of Chicago. Universities are not recruiting Black boys to play soccer at the college level, right? They're barely recruiting Americans in general. And I think, Richard, to your question, the conversations that I have to have with him about, our principles and our values, and recognizing that our values and our principles have gotten us this far, but it has come at a cost. And racism is real, and anti-Blackness is real. And a talented, highly educated Black boy who's becoming a man, that challenges the power structure. It's a threat, even though he doesn't see himself as such. And the conversation is difficult, right? Because you don't want to invoke fear, but you don't want them to be ignorant either. And so the conversation that I have with him is always centered around legacy. Like, what is it that drives us? And what are those systems in place that are reticent or darn right hostile towards us? And I talked to him recently about Booker T. Washington and his book, Up From Slavery. The difference between a Black boy and a white boy is that a white boy knows his legacy and is reminded of it and is held accountable to it, where Black boys are cut off from their legacy. And so we speak in those terms. We talk about legacy, we talk about purpose, but we also talk about these systems of oppression, giving him some clue of how to identify threat and danger, even though you don't see yourself as threat or danger. And that's a tough one, man. It's something that I was preparing for when it was clear that we were having sons. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I think that's the thing that we have to do, is to know who your children mess with, help them have context around the type of people that they're going to engage with, setting them up to be able to hear the social clues. And then, just to be perfectly frank with you, I have to know where you're going and who you're going with, period, point blank. And I think until he becomes, fully grown. I mean, I was married at 21, 22, so he has at least another 4 years.
I think he thinks he's fully grown, though.
But that is the tough conversation.
But don't we all at that age? Isn't that part of the coming of age?
You go to college. What's that mom dropping up for college?
I'm in college now, baby. I got this. Man, Brandon Johnson, what an incredible conversation. We want to thank you,
Mayor Brandon Johnson,
with us. You continue to make us proud, and the reason I say that is you are someone who, for me, and I think Richard would understand this as well, when you come into a space and there are high expectations placed on you, particularly as a brother, sometimes not immediately getting a handle on those, not immediately sort of like meeting those seems like a bigger sort of obstacle or failure. And for us, when you are branded as like the next or gifted or what have you, like when you were elected, you were the biggest thing in progressive politics. Like you were sort of like, oh, is he the next? Is he the chosen one? Is he the, and you've had to live under that pressure. I want to say that as a Black man who has watched you, I may not always agree with you. I may not always think that like that was the thing or whatever, but I appreciate that you have continued to show up for the city of Chicago, for Black men, and you've let us see your growth. You've let us watch your journey. You've let us sort of see you handle the bumps, the bruises, the nicks, the fights with ICE, the fights with POTUS, the fights with the media. Like, you know, you've let us see you rumble. And that's not always a process that people are privy to. And it's so important for us as Black men to see that, because I think it inspires on a level that none of us can truly appreciate, because of we don't have an opportunity to see how many people it touches. But for that, I want to thank you, brother, and really appreciate you being on with us for the Brothers Briefing.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Obviously, I know the mayor's a good friend of mine. I've known him for some time, and he hears critiques from me, so he's used to that. But I do think, to Charles's point, you know, being able to handle the bumps, the bruises, and the punches, and also to be able to see you punch back in an authentic way in this moment in American history when we're being punched and the punches hurt. I think matters. And I think, to your point, Charles, you said earlier, like to that 14-year-old and 15-year-old, they might be on the south side of Chicago, they might live in the Bronx, they might live in Ward 8, DC, seeing Black men in the public space get punched and say, yeah, but I'm going to punch back, and I'm going to punch back authentically, matters now more than ever.
And I'm keep coming.
And I'm gonna kick their ass, right? Like, I think that matters, and so appreciate you for doing that. And so it matters. It does.
No, look, I appreciate both of you in creating space for us. And, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, you know, the brothers who came before. Of course, you know, our late, great Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., who was an incredible mentor of mine, and may he continue to rest in power, and really pushing for the elevation and education of our people. And look, Black men are fighting back, and they're doing it in a very courageous way. Here in Chicago, our community colleges, for instance, the number one subgroup for enrollees are young Black men. You know, we have this brand new pilot program. It's a couple of years old, where we are hiring young people who are graduating from high school to work in our streets and sanitation department. If they like it, they stay. If they don't, they can go somewhere else. Well, over the last couple of years, we have over 130 participants. Many of them are young Black men. By the end of next year, that first cohort, they will be earning $90,000 a year at the age of 22. My wife and I were not earning that combined 20 years ago, and we have almost 6 degrees. And so between enrolling in our community colleges, investing in them when it comes to creating jobs and opportunities, that is really the fight back. The best way in which we can punch back is by elevating, you know, our community, and that's creating safe and affordable communities. And I'm very humbled and proud to do that in this great city.
You heard it here first, folks. Mayor Brandon Johnson. I'm the Brothers.
Yes, sir.
Hey, where that live studio audience at? What happened to them?
No, they're right here. They're right here. I just thought, you know, we know you got a heart out, but we just wanted to thank you again. Yeah. Listen, this is why you come to the Brothers Briefing, the number one source for news, views, and lifestyle for Black men. We've had an amazing conversation with the Chicago Mayor, Brandon Johnson. Thank you for joining us again. Make sure you are liked, make sure you're sharing, make sure you're subscribed. My name is Charles Coleman Jr., and my co-host is Richard Fowler, and we are the Brothers Briefing.
The fast break is up next. Mayor Brandon Johnson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, stay tuned.
All right. Charles, it's time for the fast break.
You know what that sound means. It's time for fast breaks.
Here we go. First story. The war may pause, but the certainty does not. Let's start here. Let's start overseas. Just a few weeks ago, it looked like the United States and Iran were inching towards a deal, Charles. But
what happened?
Not so fast. Instead, we're watching more rounds of attacks. We're watching finger pointing. We're watching accusations. We're watching it all, and we're watching no answers and no peace. And so here's how this is going down. The Straits of Hormuz are closed again. And the real thing here is about uncertainty. Let's just call that it. Uncertainty over the Straits means we're not sure when the oil is getting out or getting in, or when the fertilizer is getting out or getting in. Businesses don't know if the shipping lanes will stay open. Oil traders don't know if the price will go up or the price will go down. Airlines don't know how much fuel is going to cost next month. And consumers don't know whether they're about to pay more or less at the pump. We've talked about this on the show before, but the geopolitics here, they're as shaky as, they're just shaky. I won't even go any further. We're a PG show. Black families are already dealing with high cost of housing, high cost of groceries, and so much more. And Charles, I think this thing's going to last all the way till Christmas. So if you're looking for Christmas gifts, get them now.
You are the great predictor on the show. I did not know we were PG, but so be it. I
thought it would become rated X very fast. I was going to say shaky. And I was like, let me stop.
You like to go overseas and spend a lot of time in international stories, and I appreciate that, which allows me to do what I like to do, which is stay my black behind right here, domestic. Let's talk about something that's happening a little bit closer to home, my friend. CNBC had an fascinating piece and a very, very interesting piece this week that was talking to former Amazon employees after another round of layoffs. Now, for a long time, there's been a lot of conversation about the notion of AI entering the workforce. And yet here we are with this story, which I think really makes plain the argument that AI has firmly entered the workforce. It's always been there. It's been there for a very long time, but in different and new ways that are costing people their jobs. The headlines are about job cuts, but what really stood out to me about the CNBC story, Richard, was something that was a little bit deeper. People were talking about burnout. They were talking about frustration, heartbreak, and their emotions. And many of them who had spent years helping Amazon become one of the most valuable companies in the world ended up only finding themselves replaced as the company doubles down on artificial intelligence and on efficiency. We've been asking for a very long time whether AI can replace workers. Of course, it's been used in the technology in the workplace, but the actual replacement of workers is not something that we, had a clear answer to. And it seems like the answer increasingly is becoming yes. The question we have not asked enough is, what responsibility, if any, do these corporations have to workers whose labor actually put them in a position to be able to take advantage of AI and be this big in the first place?
They have a whole hell of a lot of responsibility.
And your work, and now you're ousted because of AI.
They have a whole hell of a lot of responsibility, but you can keep your black ass in America. I'm going to stay.
All right, well, come on in.
I'm going to stay somewhere in the world. This next story is about reparations. I know there's a lot of folks talking about reparations here in America, but the reparations story is actually a global one, Charles. Barbados' Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, who I really do like, she's one of my favorite people, is once again leading the push for enslaved reparations from the British. And I think it's important here. This is simply bigger than politics. It's the frame. It's not simply about writing a check. Caribbean leaders are talking about debt relief, education investment, infrastructure, acknowledging that after centuries of extractions of wealth that helped build Europe while limiting economic development throughout the Caribbean, it's about time that we turn those tables. As someone whose family comes from Jamaica, as you know, these conversations resonate with me because you can't separate today's economy in the Caribbean from yesterday's impacts of colonialism. The wealth gap between nations didn't happen on accident, Charles. And what Mia Mottley is saying is it's time for Europe and France and all of these nations that benefited off labor, enslaved labor in many of these countries, but during colonialism, benefited from the extraction of natural resources. In the case of Jamaica, it's bauxite, which is a base for aluminum. In Trinidad, it's about oil. But they benefited from these countries' natural resources to build their own wealth. It's time that they pay on the check that is owed. And this conversation is global. I mean, Mia announced this in Ghana because there's a lot of African countries who also suffered from colonialism that are asking the same thing. And here's the big question. Are we in America ready for, one, the conversation of reparations, but understanding that the conversation of reparations is not just about here, it's not just about the United States, it's a global one. And it shows that Western nations have benefited from the work and the toil of nations who are part of the Southern Hemisphere, and many nations who look a lot like me and you.
When a bird has babies and it teaches them to fly, it pushes them out the nest. And the reason why they do it is because if you wasn't ready, you're going to have to get ready. And as far as this is concerned, Richard, if America's not ready, it's going to have to get ready, because there are more and more people, myself included, who continue to make reparations and its conversation a non-negotiable when they are evaluating the agenda of public elected officials. So if you ain't ready, you better get ready.
And it's a global conversation. I think it's important for us to understand that the Black folks here are part of a global diaspora of Black people. We all cousins. So just never forget that part.
Don't forget that. Since you want to stay international, I'm going to keep this last final fast break right at home. In fact, I'm going to be very specific. And we are going to go to New York, where just this past weekend, 30 years later, Reasonable Doubt still stands alone. It sits at the intersection of struggle, survival, and success. And I would argue an additional element, now that we've seen Jay-Z sell out Yankee Stadium 3 days in a row, capitalism. This past weekend, he celebrated the 30th anniversary of Reasonable Doubt with a sold-out performance in New York and reminded everyone why it is still considered one of hip-hop's greatest albums. I mean, he brought out everyone from Rihanna to Beyonce to Blue Ivy to Nas to Jadakiss to Swiss Beats to Usher to just a host of individuals. This was a big party, but what makes this album timeless isn't just the music, it's what it represented. It really was, at its point, about Black ambition, about ownership, about trying to make something out of nothing in a system that was not actually built for you. Consider that this album was released on Rockefeller Records, which was an independent brand. When he had been rejected by the big boys, he decided, you know what? I'm going to piece this together and do my own thing. And here it is, 30 years later, Jay-Z has become the billionaire that many rappers dreamed about becoming. But the album
is so much of a billionaire, Charles, that he gets critiqued like a billionaire.
That's right. That's right. He didn't know that part. Rappers ignore that part, and they feel like those are problems they can deal with. But like he has learned he had to address that actually, and chose to during his first night show on Friday. I mean, look, the hustle may have changed, but the pursuit hasn't. I want to ask you, Richard, do you think Reasonable Doubt still sits at the top of Jay-Z's catalog, or are there another album that,
Oh, yeah. No, I think Reasonable Doubt is at the top of his catalog for sure. There's no question. There's no question about that. And listen, y'all were wilding in New York. I mean, I saw that people rushed the gates. They had to shut it down.
The Sunday show was crazy. Look,
New York didn't know how to act.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this. I did not want to.
Y'all were not on your best behavior.
Ruin people's fun. Shout out to everybody who enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the show safely. I hope you had a great time. It looked like it was a very epic event. But
New York was not on his best behavior.
Yeah, well, Jay-Z does that. It's 30 years in the making. I mean, look, this has been quite a summer for New Yorkers. We all know how to act right now.
Listen, all I got to say is when I saw the helicopter spotlight, I was like, now, that's billionaire behavior. And you can critique it, but you have to acknowledge it.
Keep in mind that there were a lot of non-New Yorkers who flew in this weekend for this show. A lot. I know people who flew in from Texas, from Memphis, came up from Maryland. I know people who came from Atlanta. There were a lot of non-New Yorkers out here acting up. So don't put that all on us.
Oh, so he's saying New York, y'all were sort of on your best behavior, on your worst behavior, but it was the other people. It was the guests who were on their bad behavior.
It was the guests who came here and didn't know how to act. In any event, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Brothers Briefing. We have had an amazing show today, and all of it is because of you all. Make sure you are like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you are sharing anywhere you find podcasts, anywhere you watch podcasts. We are the Brothers Briefing, the number one place for news, views, and lifestyles from Black men for y'all. I'm Charles Coleman Jr., and that's Richard Fowler. We'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.